Hello, this is Andrine, Jewish American Priestess, and I'm coming to you today with another Hebrew reading. We're going to do some tarot cards and some crystals, or stones rather, and then we're going to do some Hebrunes for clarification, and I'm going to do 3 cards today. Those will represent 3 different readings, and you can choose which reading resonates best for you based on the card that comes up. And here we have, this is the Mythologia Finnica deck. It's based on the Finnish Kalevala. So let's shuffle and see if we can get 3 cards out here today. There's one. I see number 2. And one more, 3. Beautiful. All right, let's take a look and see what we have here. And then we'll line up some stones to go with them. So the first one coming up is the Shaman. Second card to choose from is Tonttu. And our final reading will be on Metsänpeitto. Metsänpeitto. Still working on my Finnish pronunciation. Okay, so let's choose some stones to go with each of these, and I'm going to start with the Shaman. We're going to just go straight to the top and get our clear quartz crystal. And for Tonttu, I'm going to reach down and go with Tiger's Eye today. And for Metsänpeitto, we're going to take the Bloodstone. Hope you can see that all right. All right. So those are your 3 choices today. Number 1 is the Shaman. Number 2 is Tonttu. And number 3 is Metsänpeitto. And we'll go into what each of these speaks to when we get into your reading. So take a moment to decide which of these is calling to you today, which stone or which card. And I'll put the timestamps down below. And you can click on those and they will bring you directly to your reading. We'll see you there. Hello, friends who've chosen the Shaman today and the clear quartz crystal. And I've chosen the clear quartz because it is representative of the spiritual realms. And the shaman's job is to reach up into those spiritual realms and other worlds to bring wisdom through to this world. And in our card today, we can see we have a figure with antlers which are symbols of protection. You can see they have a drum, which is frequently an instrument of the shaman with paintings on it. There is the fiery eagle here as a spirit animal of sorts, and various other totems and implements. And the shaman in most cultures is the person in the tribe who has a deep spiritual connection to other realms. They are the one who has studied and striven for connection with divinity and has come to some form of mastery. And people will go to shamans to find out wisdom from people who have passed, and also from the spirit realm of the gods. Often the skills of a shaman is said to have been received at birth, that no one can just decide to become a shaman, that those gifts become revealed over time. It corresponds loosely to the traditional card of the Hierophant. The Hierophant is, sometimes seen as a pope or some kind of mouthpiece of the divine. In Western religion, it's pretty straightforward, but the shaman has a much deeper spiritual connection. They are someone who is about being connected with the earth and with the spirit realm both, that they have this inner guidance and this ability to impart truths. The skills of the shaman are lifelong skills that need to be honed over time, that their final initiation can sometimes be seen as a symbolic death. Sometimes they even find themselves buried in the earth literally in order to symbolize a rebirth, or even dismembered spiritually, or I guess symbolically, in order to come back together to be able to fulfill their role. So that's the card you've chosen, and I love that at this juncture for you, that maybe there's some part of you that feels called to be a shaman, or there's some part of you that feels called to visit the shaman, to have some revelations brought forth to you. And today I'm going to use the upcycled tile Hebrunes with the gold leaf on them. And we're going to just put down a set and see what comes up. We may pull out some others to clarify, or maybe another tarot card. But let's start here. I'm going to turn these so they are right side up. And we'll just start reading here. All right, I see our central issue as the Nun here. And the Nun is a letter that is said to represent someone who is kneeling with their head bowed. I think that's perfectly appropriate for the shaman. Oftentimes that's how one finds oneself in a state of humility in order to access the spiritual realm. That the meaning of Nun is basically humble, it's humility. It's the first letter of the word Ne'aman, which means humble. But it's also the first letter of the word Nes, which means miracle. So there's some magic here, some humility that's linked to magic. It's associated with people who are loyal and who are faithful. It corresponds to the stomach in the body, so having that gut feeling within oneself. And it corresponds to the Hebrew tribe of Manasseh, who was one of the sons of Joseph in Egypt, and he was humbled below his brother by his grandfather Yaakov's blessing. As is often the case in Torah, the second son is given the birthright, even though traditionally it should go to the first son. And so Menashe was humbled below his brother. So that's our central issue, is that humility here. And what's been helpful in this situation, I'm seeing the letter Bet just before this, as I read left to right. The letter Bet is the letter that corresponds to the home, the house. It's affiliated with that place where we live. And this has been helpful by finding ourselves grounded in our home. I see the Bet as also corresponding to the body, because it is where we live. Wherever we go physically in the world, we are always in our bodies, as long as we are alive. So it's a soul dwelling place. And so this is what's helped us to get to where we are now, being in contact with how we feel in our bodies and being at home in that body and being at home in the world. It can also just correspond to the earth. We're always living in our bodies and we're always living on the earth, so long as we draw breath in this world. It is the first letter of Torah, the letter that begins the word Bereshit, which means in the beginning. And so the letter Bet is a preposition. Often it means with and for and to. And so we have this idea of where are we? In what do we dwell? With whom do we dwell? And it also corresponds to the mouth in the body, which is interesting, as the shaman corresponds to the Hierophant as that mouthpiece for the divine. That this is the first letter that came out of the divine mouth when creation was spoken into existence. So something that's come right before now that has been useful is this idea of being at home in one's body, being at home in the world, being in contact with the physical sensations that exist in the body, and being in contact with the world itself. Being able to speak into existence the things that you want to see in the world. That's been useful for the person who is either inquiring of the shaman or working toward becoming the shaman. We can all become the shaman in our own way, for our own selves. We have to listen to our intuition and our divine insight. So whether you feel like you're a master or not, you have to become a master of your own existence in order to function in the world. And what I'm seeing on the lower level, this is being the path line here, the lower and a little bit further back, we have the letter Taf. And Taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So something has recently come to an end. The Taf represents a signature or a stamp or a seal, something that has been finished. So as the divine finished creating the world, this was the last letter. It's the last letter of the word Emet, which means truth. The first letter of Emet is the first letter of the alphabet. The middle letter of Emet is the center letter of the alphabet. And Tav is the last letter of the alphabet. So it's that stamp or seal, that signature on creation. So something has come to an end recently. There's been something that's final, the finality of truth. It's interesting. It corresponds to the moon in the sky. We just came past the full moon. So that's interesting. So this full moon that just passed may have been, maybe it's been challenging for you, because again, this is a little bit lower than the center line. So maybe there's been something a little challenging about the full moon in Leo. Sometimes full moons can be a little challenging, a little disturbing. They're powerful, but they're also a little bit challenging at times. There's a certain amount of judgment that comes with it. And judgment, you can see in the letter Tav, if you know a little Hebrew, that it looks a little bit like a dalet and a nun together. That nun shape is here on the left side. If you look at it like that, you can see it looks a little bit like a nun. and the dalet would be over here. It looks a little bit like a resh, but they say that it is dalet nun, which spells din, which means judgment. Dan or din. So maybe there's something that's happened recently that's brought about some sort of judgment. Maybe some ending, finality, something that you're letting go of, some kind of death that is maybe necessary but challenging. Something unconscious, this moon idea, this shadow, unseen aspect that needs to be released. So that's been a little challenging here and has come before here. And what we have above that's really helpful right now in this period of humility is the letter He. And that follows because the letter He is the first letter of the word Hineni, which means here I am. It's about presence. It's about being present in the world, being present with what is happening. And in terms of humility, that's essential. To just be present and accept what's true. It is the letter that is connected to the sense of sight. So being able to see clearly. Being able to see what is true. It has to do with the availability for service. So when one says Hineni, which means here I am, one is answering the call of the divine. Maybe to be a shaman or to be humble. Whatever it is we're needing to be right now. When we hear that call of divinity saying our name, we say Hineni, here I am, available and ready for service. He is 2 of the 4 letters of the divine name, the Yud, He, Vav, He. So sometimes I say half of divinity is showing up and being present and available. It corresponds to the liver in the body, which is interesting. It's the word for liver is keved, which means gravitas, or honor and glory. It's corresponding to the word kavod, which means honor and glory. So because it's the heaviest organ in the body, it has this weight to it. But it's also the organ in the body that filters, that's able to discern. It filters the blood. So it's an important organ in that it is discerning what is useful and what needs to be removed. What toxicities need to be removed? What is it we're letting go of here? What does it come to an end that we need to release? And what is it we need to hold on to that will nourish us? And on this journey that we're on, this shaman journey, as we are sitting in humility, sitting with presence in humility. And I'm going to pull out a couple more letters for the front here, the front end, where we're not seeing a future yet. But let's give a couple letters for a future. We'll give 3. And I'm just going to pull them out of the bag and lay them down. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. All right. And the letter that's on the path line is the letter Kuf. And the letter Kuf is, it's the first letter of the word kadosh, which means holy or sacred. So we're moving towards some kind of sacredness. But it's also the first letter of the word klipa, which means shells or shards. And it's the first letter of the word kof, which means monkey. So we have this sort of complicated letter here. There's a certain amount of holiness we're moving toward, but we also have to wrestle with our animal nature and be aware that we may encounter shards or shells of brokenness. Maybe by whatever it is we've just ended and let go. There's still some sharp parts. But kadosh or kodesh, sacredness, means that which is designated for service to the divine. So perfect for the shaman card that we've got this designation for service. And it is the number 100, which is this ultimate manifestation of the number 1. We've got the number 1, which means the oneness of all things, the oneness of divinity. And we've got, 10 times 10 times that. So we've got this very magical, sacred time that we're moving into. And it does correspond to the month of Adar, which is the next month coming up in 2 weeks. So something may be coming up in the future here in Adar is leading us toward something sacred. I am not surprised by that at all, but we do have to wrestle, like I said, with our animal nature and with dealing with those sharp, painful parts that are left over from whatever we had to release back here. What will assist us in that is the letter Yud, and the letter Yud is the first letter of the name of the divine. It is the smallest letter, and it is that particle that makes up everything in the universe. So it's like one of the divine sparks, one of the billions and trillions of divine sparks that exist in the world. It's like this seed or this one point, maybe a sperm that is cast out into the universe to create life. That's what's going to help us right now. Planting a seed, recognizing that we have planted a seed and that we need to nurture that seed right now. That we can call on the name of the divine, the Yud He Vav He, and know that we will be answered. It is this building block of the universe, and it corresponds to the foundation of sexuality in the world. So maybe there's something that needs to be healed right now in terms of sexuality in your body. It corresponds to the number 10 in Gematria, which is, like I said, 10 times 10 gives us the Kuf. But we have to go back to 10 in order to get to 100. We have to go back to that initial point in order to reach forward to sacredness. And it is corresponding to the tribe of Gad, G-A-D, Gad, who is said to be lucky. So there's some kind of luck up ahead as well. And what is not going to help us in this is the letter Mem down below, which, let me think about that. Maybe it's not that it's not going to help us, but there's some fear around this. Usually on the lower line there's either a challenge or fear. And Mem has to do with water. It's the mother letter of water, and it is the winter time, which is right now in my hemisphere, the wet season. It's about transformation and cleansing. It's the first letter of the word mikvah, which means cleansing bath. So it's this creation element of waters. It has to do with birth. It's a womb. It's the number 40, which corresponds to the 40 weeks of gestation in the human body. So there's something that's gestating below the surface. It's maybe a challenge, or maybe there's a fear underneath that it won't turn out the way we want it to. But I see that as more of a fear than of concern. That there's this fear that gestation won't work out. And if that's the case, if we have some fear around that, we need to move ourselves right back up to the Yud, right back up to that seed of sexuality, that seed, that spark, that sperm that caused the gestation, and know that our outcome is kadosh, it's holy. That whatever happens will bring us to holiness. And I think this is a lovely reading for the shaman, because here we have this shaman character who is here connecting with divinity, connecting with the other realms. And we start out with humility. We start out right in the middle with humility, that we've been connected to the earth and to our own bodies, and that has brought us to where we are now. But there's been a loss, a final, an ending, perhaps that full moon that just came by. And what's useful right now, what's helping us mostly, is being present, remaining present in our certain circumstances. And when we do that, when we remain present and humble, it'll bring us through to holiness, sacredness. And when we're having issues with our sacredness and that challenge with our animal nature and the shards of the loss that we've suffered, we just move ourselves back up to that oneness, that ultimate oneness, that 1 times 10, which is that 1 point, that 1 seed, that knowledge that everything in the universe is made up of the same stuff. Every atom comes from the same place. And if we have challenges around gestation, challenges around deep emotions, perhaps with the water, challenges around fear of whatever it is we're gestating, we just need to remember that that seed that we've planted will result in holiness. And so for those of you who chose the Shaman today, this has been your reading. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please like and subscribe. I would love to see you here again. Hello, friends who've chosen the Tonttu for your reading today. We chose also the Tiger's Eye as our stone, which is this beautiful striped and glowing tiger's eye. And I chose that, I think, mainly because of the eye on the card. It made me think of the tiger's eye. This is a picture of a depiction of somebody's Tonttu. Tonttu is a spirit that lives in your home. They are said to be a sort of I don't know, I wouldn't call them an elf exactly. Some of them are invisible. It's a spirit that lives in any building that has 4 corners. A haltia, they call them in Finnish. In Finland, this type of haltia is usually called a tonttu. It's derived from the Finnish word tontti, lot, for they are the haltias of certain places. So they're like the guardian of the space or the area where you live, maybe around your home. And you can have several in your property. If you have, like, say, a sauna, you might have a sauna tonttu. And you might have one in the stable. If you have a stable, garage, maybe you have a garage tonttu. But they are said to be benevolent, and they do live in this dwelling place. Oftentimes in this culture, they would provide food for the tonttu and make sure that they are happy and secure, because they do sort of give blessing. Some are like small people, some have a giant eye in the middle of their head, some are covered in mold with their moss in their beards and such. They look at varying ways, but it doesn't matter what they look like. Sometimes they kind of act as a moral guardian to the home. They don't like quarrelsome behavior, and some don't like their dishes that don't get cleaned overnight. So if there's some kind of clutter or discomfort in your house, in your home, the tonttu does not like it, and they might make it challenging. They might make your home unpleasant until you take care of your business. Sometimes they're known to smash dishes and such. But they're diligent laborers. They work hard to take care of the home, and they work until they get the job done. So they are important spirits of the home. And I can say that, whether you believe in haltias or tonttus or not, that if there's some discord in your home, you will feel it for sure. So let's set this tonttu over here to the side with his tiger's eye. I'm going to pull out a handful of Hebrunes today from my upcycled tile set with the gold leaf and see what kind of reading we've got going for today. All right. Okay, we've got 4 to start. And I'm going to just turn those so that we can see the letters nice and clearly in this configuration. Generally, there's one that calls out as the central issue here. And I guess if I'm looking at this now, where I'm seeing that is the letter Vav. I'm going to say this is our central issue. Yeah, that feels right. Our central issue is the letter Vav. And the letter Vav is the letter in Hebrew that is about connection. It literally means and in the language. It's a long, straight, tall person with their little head bowed. So there's a little bit of humility to it, but it's about, just having a tall, straight spine, or maybe a taproot deep into the earth. It also means peg or hook in the ancient Proto-Hebrew. These hooks or pegs were often used to connect things. So that piece of connection, or the andness of it, they would connect the veils together around the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle in the wilderness, or they would be the tent pegs that held down the guy wires for the Mishkan, the tabernacle, again, in the wilderness, this giant tent that was the place of worship. So it's this connecting piece, that which connects the human to the divine, and can also tether these buildings to the earth, or connect two things together. So it's about unity with divinity. It's about joining the heaven and the earth. It is the number 6 in Gematria, so it's about the 6th day of creation. And also the 6 directions, if you think about it, north, south, east, west, up, and down are all the different directions that one might face when worshiping on the earth. Certainly we do that during Sukkot when we wave the lulav. We wave it in all 6 directions. And that's common for many indigenous cultures, those sacred 6 directions. It governs time in that the letter Vav in the Hebrew language can change a verb from past to future. So that's very interesting. Or from future to past. If you add a Vav to a certain verbs, it changes their tense completely. And I love that. It is corresponding to the tribe of Issachar in the 12 tribes of Israel. Issachar is the tribe that connects the idea of wealth and study. So one might study, and maybe they're being supported by a wealthy patron. In the case of Issachar, he was supported by his brother Zebulun, who would work so that Issachar could study according to the Talmud. So when I see it, it is this connection piece between heaven and earth, between the human and the divine. So that is our central issue here, is this connection. We're having something that's connecting. And what's been useful for us in the recent past is the letter Tav. And the letter Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It is an ending. It's something that's just come to an end. It's a signature or a stamp, some kind of seal, when somebody has finished a thing. Something has just recently come to an end. And it's given us a certain amount of satisfaction, maybe. We've completed a project. It also corresponds to the moon in the sky. Tav rules over the moon. Each of the letters has a celestial body affiliated with it, and Tav is the moon. So since we've just passed through the full moon of Leo in the sky, maybe that's what's been spurring us on right now, this idea of the fullness of a thing that has just come to an end. And it does, it is affiliated with the word din, which means judgment. You can see that it sort of looks like a dalet and a nun here if you read Hebrew. And so it has to do with judgment. Something recently has required some discernment or judgment. And that has been useful for us too. There's been some discernment that's happened recently. Let me listen in about Tav here. It's the center of the celestial temple. There's this concept that there's a temple that is unseen where the divine dwells in the universe. And it's like a cube. It has 6 sides, north, south, east, west, up, and down. And Tav is said to be the center of that. So that's interesting, of corresponding to Vav being the 6 sides and Tav being the center of that temple. And Tav corresponds to the binary transformation of sovereignty and slavery. So there's that continuum between being a slave and being a king. And where do we land on that? Because this is in the upper levels of the reading, I'm guessing it has to do with sovereignty and finding one's own sovereignty. Maybe in having completed the project, one feels wonderful and sovereign in their own determination and ability to finish their projects. And what's come before that, again, also slightly above the Vav in this reading, is the Dalet. And Dalet is a doorway. It's about liminal space. It's about having passed through something. And because we have the Tonttu here, maybe it's a literal doorway in some home, or perhaps it's a metaphorical doorway, and that we've passed through some period of time. There's been some liminality, that we've had some sort of challenge that we've needed to transport ourselves through, a threshold of some sort that we've had to overcome. And it corresponds to the number 4, so it's the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 elements, the 4 letters of the name of the divine. And that's come just before here. We've had this doorway we've had to pass through to get to the other side, to get to where we are now in this connection piece. And what's been challenging for us in this time is the Ein Sof. This is the blank that I keep in each of my sets. And it corresponds to that without end, this idea of eternity, this maybe it's a little overwhelming sometimes, this idea of the endlessness, the void, the tohu vavohu, they call it, the primordial chaos. That there's this idea of infinity and everything that existed before creation that will return to that. And maybe there's a little fear around that idea of the infinite, or some challenge with comprehending that it would be nice to just sit here in our warm homes by the hearth with our Tonttu and not have to worry about the infinite. But the infinite comes, and when it does, we have to wrestle with it. So if we've had some challenges with this idea of infinity, if we've had some challenges with this idea of oneness of all, being able to look at another person and notice we're the same, we're made up of the same stuff, and we all have inherent value, then it's time for us to get connected with ourselves, to get connected with the divine, to get connected with our own sovereignty. And I'm going to take out 3 more Hebrunes, and we're going to just lay them here on the right to give us a little bit of a glimpse into what's coming down the pike. And we have the Resh, and above we have the Lamed, beautiful. And below that we have Pei. Interesting. Okay. So whoever's chosen the Tonttu today, they seems to have an issue with the infinite because the letter Pei is corresponding to the number 80. And the number 80 is also the infinite. It's an ultimate manifestation of the infinite. You can see the 8 looks like an infinity symbol on its side, and 10 times 8 is this ultimate manifestation of the infinite. And the Pei looks like a spiral, spiraling in and spiraling out. There's some challenge for whoever is listening to this with the infinite, with this concept of infinity, with this big picture stuff. Maybe it's just really overwhelming right now to think about how do we fit into the infinite? How do we? Maybe we're so concerned with the immediate thing that's going on that we're losing sight of the big picture. That seems to be what's up here, because the letter Pei, it's a mouth. So it's about communication, it's about creation through speech. And maybe that's part of it too, not being able to create what you want to see with your own words in time. It is this letter that is is about creating reality with your words, about blessing instead of cursing, about being able to, it's about being able to speak your reality into existence. So if you have something you want to see in the world, you have to be able to speak it out loud. Maybe there's some issues with speaking right now too. But since we have two infinity symbols right on the lower line, I'm guessing there's a fear. There's a fear around infinity right now. And what's coming ahead, we have the letter Resh right here. And the letter Resh means beginning. It means head. It's the letter begins the word Rosh, which means head. So Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the new year. Rosh Chodesh, which means head of the month. It's the first day of a new month or of a new year. So it's something about beginning. Some new beginning is happening. It's right there in the first word of Torah, Bereshit, which means in the beginning, and it's the binary transformation of seed and barrenness. There's something new coming up, and we don't know whether it's going to produce what it is we want to see in the world. And my guess is there's some fear around that because of these infinity symbols being on the lower line. And we can speak into the world what we'd like to see. We have this new beginning coming. It is the letter that begins the word poor, a poor one, a Rosh, and also wickedness, Rasha. So there's this concern maybe for whether something is not going to work out the way we want it to, or whether there's something evil afoot. But I don't see it that way. There's a potential. There's always a potential for destruction. There's always a potential for things not working out the way we want it to. But Resh is the head. It's the head in the body. So it's about intellect also, maybe overthinking. That's what's coming up ahead. We've got this idea of connection, and then we've got the head here, or something new that's coming out of that. And what's going to help us in that is the letter Lamed. And Lamed is the one letter that reaches above the line. So it is about reaching up toward divinity. It's about reaching up with heart. The letter Lamed begins the word Lev, which means heart. And so we have this aspiration of the heart, reaching up toward the divine. It also begins the words to teach and to learn. So we're learning something. Maybe we're learning it and we're teaching it too. And that will give us that hope that's coming here. There's this elevation of the heart toward the divine, and about education, learning and teaching, maybe digesting and absorbing what it is we're taking in. It corresponds to the intestines in the body as well. So it's taking in something, absorbing it, digesting it, determining what is of value and releasing what is not of value. It is the letter that corresponds to the tribe of Ephraim. And Ephraim was the son of Joseph in Egypt. And he was elevated above his brother by his grandfather Yaakov's blessing. He was the second son, but he was given the birthright. As frequently happens in Torah, the first son is, for some reason, not given the birthright, and the second son is elevated. And so we have this idea of elevation, reaching up with heart, reaching up toward the divine, of learning, of digesting, of absorbing information, of teaching information, and also just having action. It's the foundation of action as well. So hope and action and heart is how I'm seeing this. We have this this newness coming. That there's connection happening right now. There's some kind of connection. Maybe we're connecting with the divine. Maybe we're connecting with another human. That just recently we've come through something that has finished. That something has come to an end. There's been some discernment, maybe judgment around that. Maybe that full moon has propelled us and helped us in our connection. That before that we came through a doorway. That we passed through some liminal space. into this period of connection. But there's some concern about whether things are going to last. Maybe are things going to last forever? Do we have a connection with the infinite? Maybe do we have a connection with the infinite spiritually, or is this connection that we're having going to last? Maybe that's what it's about. We talked about when we read about the Tonttu, about how if there is discord in the house, this will make the Tonttu unhappy. So we have this connection now, but will it last? We have some thoughts about that. This new seed, this new seed that's about to come in to our future. But again, more concerns about the infinite, more concerns about being able to speak what we want to see in the world. And that spiral, where do we fit into that labyrinth of the infinite? But if we have those concerns, the thing we can think about is reaching up with heart, reaching up toward divinity, reaching up with heart toward the divine, to teach what we need to teach, to take in and learn what we need to learn, and digest what we need to digest in our bodies. And when we do that, we'll come back to this seed that we're planting, and all will be well. Because when it comes down to it, like I said, we're all made of the same stuff, and we all come from and will return to the Ein Sof, to that without end. So find peace with your Tonttus in your home. Take care of them and connect with them, perhaps. Connect with your body. Connect with your place of dwelling. And reach up with heart is what I'm seeing as our advice here. So for those of you who chose the Tonttu, this has been your reading. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will look forward to seeing you here again next time. Hello, friends who chose Metsänpeitto. This is your card. I'm going to hold him up here. He corresponds very loosely to the Two of Pentacles. And I mean, there's no gender in the Finnish language, but this character is about being put under a charm. So Metsänpeitto is literally means forest cover. And it is said that when people used to walk in the woods, there would be these folk of the earth who would trick them into getting lost in the woods. And they would kind of give them a charm that they wouldn't be able to find their way home or find their way out. They could make an animal disappear completely. So if a chicken walked into the forest, it might just vanish. And the people of the ancient Finnish tribes would blame that on Metsänpeitto. Children who had been lost in the woods might say they were never hungry or cold because maybe they were cared for by the Metsänpeitto. So they could both confuse and lose people, but also care for them while they're out there in the woods. One way to free yourself from the charm was to turn all of your clothes inside out and put your shoes on the wrong feet, and maybe go back to the way you came if you were suddenly shown the way home. So sometimes it's like a sleep paralysis for some folks, that they would be able to hear people calling for them, but they wouldn't be able to respond. So it seems to be a sign that maybe there's a need for a retreat from the maelstrom of life. Maybe it's time to spend some time alone in the woods, but not getting lost there, but find some silence, find some place of privacy where you can just spend some time taking care of yourself, relaxing and doing what you need to do. But it also may be about getting inadvertently lost in the world. Maybe there's a fog over you because you've been too overwhelmed, and maybe depression or something that's making it very difficult for you to break free from whatever charm is over you. If there's some kind of limitations that you'd like to get rid of, or some way that you'd like to have more clarity in your life, maybe Metsänpeitto is here to lead you out of the forest. And I chose the bloodstone because it reminded me of that, with this kind of cloudy red droplets within this bright green stone. So however that resonates for you here, it almost looks like a moss agate, and I'm not clear whether it's a moss agate or a bloodstone, but it's that green with the red dots in it, and I love that. It's a really gorgeous piece here. Yeah, but unclear is all I'm saying. We don't know what that is. We don't know what kind of stone it is. It's sort of cloudy. So that's our general theme for this reading, and we're going to pull out a handful of Hebrunes from our upcycled tile and gold leaf set, and toss those down and see what is coming up for those of you who chose Metsänpeitto today. Oh boy, we've only got one. Interesting. Well, let's start with that, and then we'll get out a bunch more. Whew. Okay, well, interestingly, our letter is Gimel, and the letter Gimel means move forward, walk forward. So that is our general idea here today. It's time to move. If you've been stuck, if you've been paralyzed by whatever it is that has stopped you, it is time to get up and move forward. The letter Gimel is a foot or a camel. It's about walking forward, and it is this binary foundation of peace and evil. So something that maybe hasn't been serving you, it's time to walk away from that and move towards something that is whole and peaceful for you. It's some say it's about running toward justice. It is the number 3, so it corresponds to the 3 creation elements of fire, water, and air. There's this, again, binary continuum between wholeness and wickedness, and it does rule over the planet Jupiter in the sky. Jupiter, which in Hebrew is tzedek, which means justice. And it's also the largest planet in our solar system, so something really big. It's time to move toward or move away from something really big. Maybe both. Move away from something large and towards something larger. So towards something just. It corresponds to the right eye in the body, so it's about seeing very clearly. And I see it as corresponding to the patriarch Yaakov, Jacob, who is someone who ran from his brother Esau when he had stolen his birthright, and he sojourned very far in the world. And he also saw the angels running and returning to and from heaven on his dream about the ladder, when he slept and dreamed and knew that the divine was in the place, Hamakom. So there's a lot of movement here that you're being called toward. That maybe you've been lost and a little bit muddied, and it's time to get up and move forward. We're going to pull out some more because that's not enough for a full reading for you. So I'm just going to grab another handful and see what comes up right. I'll just drop them down. Okay, we got a few more. Great. I'll turn these so that they are upright. Make sure that's the right one. Okay, yes. All right, so here is the rest of our reading. We've got this Gimel. We're moving forward, and the next thing that comes up is a doorway. We're moving toward a doorway. We're moving from where we've been through this liminal space. This liminal space, which is the letter Dalet. Dalet is a door. It is the number 4 in Gematria. It's the letter that comes right after Gimel. So it seems like a good process here. You've moved forward. Now you're going through a doorway. And it's about humility. Maybe you need to humble yourself in order to walk through that door. And the binary transformation of wisdom and foolishness. Come away from the foolishness, walk toward wisdom. Since this is above in the reading, I'm going to make the interpretation that this is about moving toward wisdom. Stop being foolish. Stop hanging out in the forest. Time to wake up, walk away, get through that doorway. It's about, again, with humility though. Don't get full of yourself, and thank you. Don't get full of yourself and walk through. That chime that goes off is a random chime, and every time it goes off, it reminds me that the divine is here with us. So having spoken that out loud, just as that chime went off, I believe that's true. Walk through with humility. Don't get full of yourself. Walk through the doorway and move toward the next thing. This can correspond to, in the tarot, the death card, which is about transformation. So there's this major transformation that needs to happen. But it's time for you to get up and walk forward, get through that doorway. And then we get to the Pei. The letter Pei is the letter that corresponds to a mouth. So it is said to be the mouth of the divine speaking the creation into existence. You can see it looks a little bit like a mouth. It's also a spiral. So it is the number 80 in Gematria, so it has to do with the ultimate manifestation of the infinite. You've got this infinity symbol, which is the number 8 on its side that kind of goes back and forth in that loop. And then the 10 times that makes that ultimate manifestation of the infinite. And since we have this labyrinthine spiral that goes in and out infinitely, we can think of it as this transformation through eternity. But it's about communication. It's about speaking one's reality into existence. It's about the ability to use words to create our reality. The divine created by speaking the universe into existence, and we have also been given that gift to speak our reality into existence. So it's time to start blessing and stop cursing, to move forward and be grateful for what we have, and follow that labyrinth to the infinite. It is the binary foundation of grace and ugliness. So what is it that we find beautiful? And what is it we find ugly in the world? And how can we see forward to creating beauty in the world and walking away from that which we find ugly, or seeing the beauty in the ugliness? Perhaps maybe we're seeing things as ugly, but they're not ugly, that we need to start seeing what's beautiful in the ugly in the world. And as we walk through that doorway toward the infinite, and maybe running actually from wherever we've been through that doorway into the infinite, we will come next to Tzaddik. Tzadi. Tzadi is the first letter of the word tzadik, which means righteousness, righteous one, or tzedek, which means justice. And we've got the Gimel, which rules over the planet Tzedek, Jupiter, in the world, in the universe. And here we have Tzedek again, this idea of justice. And Tzadi also is the first letter of the word Said, which means hunting, looking, searching for what is righteous, searching for what is just in the world. We've got this letter that is made up of a bent over nun and a yud on its back. Nun is the letter that corresponds to humility again. So humility, but with divine, with divinity. The yud is the first letter of the name of the divine. So we have divinity at our back as we move forward with humility. When we move forward with humility, we know the divine has our back. So it's time for us to move forward toward justice. And that is really clear here, since we have both Tzedek with the Dalet moving forward and Tzadi with righteousness and justice here, coming up in the future. And interestingly, we also have the blank Ein Sof down below, and the Ein Sof is also about the infinite. It is that without end. So having that very at the top and at the bottom, it's really interesting. The Ein Sof is the blank, and it means boundlessness, the void. Maybe that timelessness, primordial chaos. Tahom is what it's called. It's the deep. That all things come from the infinite, and that all things will return to the infinite. And maybe there's a challenge down here. Maybe there's a challenge coming up that we don't know how we fit into this, that there's this confusion, because there's just this boundlessness or this chaos that we've been lost in the forest. And now we're coming through. What are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do is, when we find ourselves being concerned or fearing that which we do not see, is we're going to step forward through the doorway toward the infinite and trust in justice with humility. Again, be humble in this situation. This is the message I'm getting over and over again from these letters. And this card is, you can't be full of yourself here. You have to trust in the divine. You have to trust in the infinite. That the infinite is here for you. It's got your back. But you have to have humility here. I'm going to pull out 2 more letters and lay them down to the right here as a outcome and maybe as an advice as well. Let's see. Our advice is going to be Kuf, and our outcome is Bait. Beautiful. Okay. Interesting. We're getting a lot of the same letters in these readings today, so something is up that's connecting a lot of these readings. If you were drawn to the first reading, you might want to go back and watch that as well. The letter Kuf we have is, it stands for Kadosh, which means holiness or sacredness, that which is designated for divine service. And so our advice here is to reach toward divinity. Search for divinity in the world. So Kuf is the one letter that reaches below the line, and it is said that it's about a righteous one who is reaching down into the world, searching for divinity within humanity. The word tzaddik begins with tzadi and ends with kuf. So having them next to each other is just beautiful. So a tzaddik is somebody who is righteous, and tzayid is somebody who hunts for divinity in the world. So here we have the kuf, where it's asking us to reach down into the world and search for holiness, search for sacredness everywhere we go. But if you are humble, one can see sacredness in all things. That if you look closely enough and spend enough time in humility with anything, you can find the divinity within it. Kuf is also the letter that begins the word klipa, which means shards or shells. And that speaks to this story that when the divine was creating the universe, it had to make space for the universe to exist. So it contracted itself, tzimtzum, this idea of contraction into itself. And those divine lights were stored in vessels, but divinity was too strong to be held within vessels, so those vessels shattered. And those shattered pieces flew out into the universe, as well as the sparks of light flying out into the universe. And klipa are those shattered pieces. Some say that the klipa are what causes pain and suffering in the world. But there's also the divine sparks, which bring us back to the understanding of divinity. So we're searching for the divine sparks, and we are being mindful of the klipa, those shells or shards that are out there in the universe as well. And the other word that begins kuf is the word kof, which means monkey. And a monkey symbolizes maybe mischief making, maybe our animal nature that doesn't want to follow the rules and just wants to make a fuss. So we also need to be mindful of that. So as our advice, we are being asked to search for divinity in the world, to mind our animal nature, to embrace it and love it and recognize the divinity within it, but also to tame it perhaps. Be mindful of those shards and shells, that pain maybe is a part of the process, but it isn't the end all and be all of existence. We don't need to suffer. There is pain, but suffering is optional. So the other thing that Kuf corresponds to is it is the foundation of sleep. So maybe it's time just to get more rest. It's interesting because with the Metsänpeitto, one of the suggestions is that maybe we just need some time to rest. We need to take some time to rest right now. And I love that for you. Searching for justice when it's appropriate, but also taking the time to rest. And our outcome letter is the letter Beit. And Beit is the letter that means home. And interestingly, I would say that definitely rest is in order because Beit is the letter that rules over the day Shabbat. Shabbat meaning rest. It is a house. It's the home. But the word Shabbat has Beit right in it. Both letters of the name Beit, B and Tav, the Beit and the Tav. And so it's about sitting in the home, taking time to rest, and also taking care of your body. I think of Beit as being a house, like a literal structure, but it also is where we dwell. Where does our soul dwell? It dwells in our body. Also, it dwells in the world, in the earth, wherever we are. We're always dwelling somewhere. So as we move forward into the next iteration, it's time to take care of our bodies and rest a little bit and make sure that we are on track. So for those of you who chose Metsänpeitto, what I'm saying is move forward. This is the time for you to stop being lost in the forest, get up, shake off your paralysis, and move toward the doorway. And as we move through that doorway, we will come in contact with the infinite, that spiral. And we'll move toward justice. We'll know that with humility, both with the Dalet being humble and with the Nun and the Yud being humble with the divine in our back, in the Tzadi, that we'll be able to find justice. If we're finding ourselves confused or overwhelmed by the everythingness or the confusion of the void, that we can move ourselves back up to that connection, that spiral, that ability to speak our reality into existence. So take some time to use some incantations, use some affirmations, write things out if that's helpful for you. Do something that allows you to speak what you'd like to see into the world, into existence. Our advice here is to get enough rest, to reach into the world and find divinity where it is, to tame our animal nature, and then come home. Come home to our bodies, pay attention to what our bodies want and need. And again, get enough rest that we can move through this situation, out of this confusion, toward home, whatever home looks like to you. So for those of you who chose Metsänpeitto, it's a really clear message today. I hope that you get the rest you need. If you like this reading, please like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you here next time.